everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Ferry. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Robin Lefkowitz, and I'm Executive Vice President, Director of Business Development and Branch Administration for Northfield Bank. This show is a brainchild of the Staten Island Economic Development Corporation. For those of you who don't know what the SIEDC is, it's an organization that advocates for the businesses on Staten Island, and I'm proud to say I'm an ambassador for that organization. This issue of Beyond the Ferry is going to have three guests. We have Michael Bloomberg from Techie Geeks, Michael Purpura from RPM Insurance, and my first guest, Anthony Santos, CPA with Henry Malarkey and Company. And with that, I'd like to say hello, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Robin. How are you?
Good. Well, welcome to this edition of Beyond the Ferry.
Thank you for having me.
So it's perfect timing that you're a guest, because let's talk about tax reform. Dum, dum, dum. So everyone has questions, and I'm sure you heard a million people being confused.
Yes.
So what's the biggest question that you've been asked?
Basically, it's a pervasive tax change. It's the major tax change in over 3 decades, and it's effective for calendar year 2018. It was signed into law on December 22nd of 2017, but it's effective for 18, and basically it'll be in for about the next 8 years, and then it sunset goes back to the old tax law.
Right.
But there's tremendous changes. We start with the individuals. As you know, the tax rates have changed. There's 6 levels of tax rates, and they've been reduced by about 2 to 3% per particular bracket.
Well, we've all seen a little bit of a bump up in our pays,
yes,
recently.
Basically, the charts are computerized, and because of the decrease in tax rates and the increase in the standard deduction, that causes most middle-class taxpayers to have a few more dollars in their paychecks at the end of the week.
Which is great.
Which is, everybody seems to like it. But there's a bunch of other changes besides the tax rates, the standard deductions. The exemptions are no longer applicable, but then they increase the child tax credit. So it kind of offsets the repeal of the exemptions. So it kind of balances that revision. Also, the major thing with homeowners here on Staten Island is they reduce the amount of mortgage interest that can be deducted on indebtedness. You used to be able to have $1 million mortgage for the acquisition of a home. That's been reduced to $750,000 for all mortgages incurred after, or indebtedness incurred after January 1st. If you had a prior mortgage of $1 million, that your interest would still be deductible.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. See, that I think is a fallacy. Everybody believes that everybody changed.
No, if you had your mortgage in place before December 31st, actually December 15th, it's carried forward, so it's grandfathered in.
Okay.
If you refinance that $1 million, it's still grandfathered in. If you take any additional funds, then it's not grandfathered. So you have to be very particular if you're refinancing your mortgage on the limitations. And the other thing affecting homeowners, which everyone has been talking about, is the reduction of the real estate taxes and state and local taxes, the SALT deduction.
Okay.
That's limited to $10,000. So that does hurt people of Staten Island and New York City, because your total SALT deduction, which is your real estate taxes and state and local taxes, is limited to $10,000, which is not a lot of money for people on Staten Island.
Well, it must also hurt people in New Jersey as well,
exactly.
Especially because their taxes are so high.
Any high tax state, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, they've all been hurt basically by this provision in the new tax law.
Right. So where they're getting back in one area, they may be giving up in a little.
Exactly. And they reduced they increased the exemption. So most people in the upper middle class has been paying on the AMT if you have a high salary individual. That's been revised, so most people will not fall into that AMT going forward, where in 2017, where yourself or other people would fall into the AMT category. So that's going to be alleviated a little bit. So
even with the deductions being lessened for real estate and state taxes, people may wind up ahead because of the reduction and not falling into the AMT tax.
Exactly. There's a fallacy that everybody's panicking because of this $10,000 limitation.
Yes.
However, if you're falling into AMT, it will not have as impact as people think. So before you panic, do a provision. The tax programs now, actually, when you prepare your 17 return, it gives you what the 18 results would be under the new tax law, but you'd have to have a sophisticated tax program.
Well, I also think that everybody's accountant should tell them next year, well, you actually
Most
paid
accountants, exactly. Most
a little
accountants would
less,
give
or-
you a schedule on where you're going to be next year, because that seems to be the topic of interest. Wow,
Okay.
how is this law going to affect me in 18?
Sure.
So we do produce a schedule that the client can look
Right.
at and could see where they're going to fall into next year, so they can plan
That
ahead.
makes sense. Now let's talk about corporate taxes for a few minutes. How are they going to change? The corporate tax rate was reduced,
The
correct?
corporate tax rate, we had a gradual rate in 17, which was 15%, and it went to 35%. It's going to be a flat 21% for 2018 through 2025.
And the hope is to get
Hope is
more money
the hope,
to
exactly. The
hire
hope is
and-
the theory behind the Trump theory was
Yeah.
that to give the corporations more cash available, pay less tax, and they would put that into the economy and create jobs. We have yet to see that. There's been some articles that I think Mark Rubio of Florida just said he hasn't seen it basically coming back to his area, but it's still relatively new. It's only April or May 1st actually.
Right.
So we haven't seen the full effect of this
probably
tax law.
won't happen until next year, or at least start to happen.
We
until
probably
next year.
exactly right. We probably won't feel that until
Right.
see or be able to chart that until next year.
Sure. What other changes do you think corporations are going to
Well,
see?
basically, they also give incentive to write off equipment. There used to be $500,000 where you could have a Section 179 expense to write off your equipment. That
Right.
increased to $1 million.
Which again spurs the economy.
Exactly.
Right.
That was, I think, the thinking behind the Trump administration to spur the economy. Now, if I go out and buy a piece of equipment for $1 million, I get 100% write-off. Also, they changed bonus depreciation where it used to be 50%. They increased that to 100%. So there's incentives there, basically, to go out and try to spend some money to spur the economy. I'm trying to think some other provisions. It's a vast change, so you really have to look at everything. The major thing also with corporations and pass-through entities, they now have where there's a 20% deduction. So if you're passing through an S-corp or a partnership into your personal
Right.
return, you have a 20% deduction of that pass-through income. So that should help
Right.
small corporations, small businesses, and partnerships and things of that nature.
So it sounds to me, without being an accountant, that there's a lot of money that should be going back and forth between individuals, corporations, and then spending. That should be what's happening. Probably not initially, because people aren't really sure yet where
Right.
it's going to fly. But
That's
hopefully next year.
that's the intent, I believe, behind
Right.
behind the legislation is
Good.
to get more money into the economy, get business growing again, and as you see, the stock market has rallied.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So again, it's still early, but time will be the test of whether it's
Good.
enacted the way it's supposed to be.
what do you think is everybody's biggest fear that you've been hearing?
Well,
Feedback from clients.
I think the biggest panic was the repeal of the SALT deductions. But I think if they speak to their accountant and they realize that it might not be as bad,
Right.
and most people may fall into the standard deduction, where you're getting married couples getting a $24,000 standard deduction, where they won't feel that SALT deduction as much as they initially anticipated.
What
So,
was last year's deduction for a married couple?
I believe it was $12,000.
Oh, wow. So it's
basically
double.
double.
So it really is making up for it, because in a lot of cases, not everybody fell into that higher category.
Yeah, and they also repealed the miscellaneous itemized deductions, where if you took your work clothes, your work boots, you're able to take that on your itemized deduction. That's no longer available. So most people in the middle class will be under the standard deduction.
Right, which sounds significant.
So that should, and the preparation might be easier. So again, they might be able to prepare their own returns, but as an accountant, I hope that's not true.
No, it's too difficult.
It's too difficult. It'd be a terrible tax
You
rate,
have to-
but
you have to
they,
think
they
about
still may
that.
need a CPA, so I don't
Exactly.
think we're going anywhere.
Right,
so that's
no, I
good.
don't think so either. So if you were to leave our viewers with one word of advice or some wisdom, what would you say that would be?
Well, I would just say to speak to your accountant, because the law was pervasive, and not to panic. Just to speak with your accountant, see what advantages can be or disadvantages this new law would affect to you, because everybody is different. Everybody has a different tax perspective. So speak
Sure.
to your accountant, your CPA, and hopefully he'd advise you with the effects of the new tax law.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be
So
here.
this was great. This is Anthony Santos, and I think you learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Our next guest is Michael Purpura with RPM Insurance. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Robin. Thank you for having me.
Great. So now let's talk a little bit about what insurance is a necessity for a business.
It's a really good question. The answer is it depends. So I'll qualify that. Statutorily, we'd be talking about workers' compensation and disability. Those are really the two that are absolutely required if you have employees. The Labor Department requires it as part of the workers' comp law. So the workers' compensation coverage is injury to employees arising out of the course of their occupation. And then the disability coverage is for non-occupational injuries. So if somebody were to get the flu or get sick at home and be out, it's a disability claim. If they got hurt on the job, it's a workers' comp claim. Those would be the absolute two mandated by statute. But the list would go on. If you own a building and there's a mortgage on it, the bank is going to require you to have fire insurance. So it depends.
Right.
I would suggest that people look at their exposures and make a determination as to what they think might be required. I will say that one of the things that, in my opinion, cyber insurance and employment practices liability insurance are two very critical things in today's business world.
So why don't you explain those a little bit, because maybe everyone's familiar with the workman's comp, the disability, and just fire.
Yeah, sure. So cyber insurance is a data-driven policy. The claims can come from basically two areas. We refer to them as first party or third party. First party meaning your systems or your network, and then third party would be the claims that are coming from someone else. So it almost acts as a if you were to look at a property and a liability policy, the first party of a cyber insurance policy would be equivalent to a property insurance policy. And then the third party coverage would be the equivalent of a liability insurance policy, where it's defending you against somebody. And the coverages in the policies include ransomware. If you've got a regulatory response, not only do customers get upset when your data is hacked, so do the state's attorneys generals, and they'll invite you to have a conversation and come explain why you didn't protect our, their citizens' data, and that can get expensive. You want to go with an attorney, you want to be represented. Ransomware, we're seeing a lot of computers that are locked, and the hackers will call up and say, we have control of your computer, give us $5,000 in Bitcoin. And those coverages are actually available in a cyber policy.
Wow.
So we're seeing a lot of, you can't turn the news on anymore without hearing about somebody being hacked, and even municipalities, no one's exempt. If you're connected to the internet and you've got data, you're exposed.
Right.
The other part of it too, though, is it's not just computer data. Paper records are involved. So if you're a doctor's office, as an example, and you've got medical files, HIPAA claims are huge. Hackers love medical files because they've got health insurance information.
They have everything.
Everything. Right. So lawyers, doctors, as I mentioned, accountants, insurance brokers. You name it. If you've got banking, if you've got paper records, those are actually covered under a cyber claim. Most people are under the assumption that it's electronic records, and it's not. It's also paper records. They need to be secured as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the other part of it, then getting away from the cyber, is the employment practices, or the acronym for that would be EPLI. So if you hear somebody say EPLI, we're talking about employment practices liability insurance.
Okay.
And it's basically defense against wrongful termination.
I was going to say your HR claims.
Exactly. Wage and hourly defense. Sexual harassment. The Me Too movement is bringing a lot of these issues to the forefront.
Right.
So those are two coverages that I think every business should really be looking into.
Yes.
And there are, the policies are very complicated and they're evolving. Both employment practices, although that's a little more established, but cyber is like the Wild West. The policies are changing every day. I'm
sure, because there's so many different viruses and hackings and phishing. And
exactly. I read insurance policies. I'm a bit of an insurance geek, so I actually read for coverage terms and conditions.
Yes.
And cyber just confuses me because I don't understand the vernacular. The language is just different, so it can be a little complicated. But the policies are evolving as new exposures, become available in law. We learn from lawsuits, basically, which is interesting.
Right. Well, I guess that's what shows precedence. Too.
Exactly.
You have to go by something.
Exactly. Yes. So we kind of
Sure.
respond to those type of issues.
Now, what's considered too much insurance? I mean, like you're talking about all these different types of insurance, but how do you determine what is the dollar threshold that's adequate for your business?
Again, it depends.
Of course it does.
So obviously budgetary issues are
Yes.
a big concern. When we're talking about tangible items, so we're talking about a desk, a chair, a building, we can kind of drill
Yeah,
down.
you can estimate what that's worth.
Not to an exact science, but close
No,
enough.
yeah.
Simple math. If I
Same
know
thing
how
we
it's
do on
built.
our homeowners.
Exactly,
right, yes.
exactly. So you can kind of get very close
Right.
there. When it comes to liability coverage, though, you know, my standard response when someone asks that question is you buy as much as makes you feel comfortable or
Okay.
that you can afford. Now that's for general liability, defense against lawsuits. When we're talking about cyber claims, getting back to that,
Right.
there are actually online services where you can plug in the number of records that you have, as an example. How much
Right.
personal, non-public personal information do you have?
Right.
And we can forecast if a certain number of those records are impacted, what the claim might look like.
Okay.
So you can kind of drill down and
Right.
get a little closer. When it comes to cyber insurance, most people are surprised that we're recommending much higher limits than your traditional general liability coverage. Industry standards, I shouldn't say that I'm recommending. Bodily injury claims, you know, broken legs, broken ankle, we've got data as
Right,
to
they
how
have like
actuarially we know,
yes,
you know, kind
how
of
much
where
it's
they're going to
worth.
settle at. It's not uncommon to see cyber claims that blow through $1 million. So larger companies, it's not unheard of to have 10, 20, $50
Right.
million in cyber insurance.
Wow.
Larger
Yes.
entities, obviously, but
Right.
that one you're really matching the exposure to, you know, to the potential of a claim. The difference between a cyber claim and a bodily injury claim,
Right.
you know, it's a one-off. Somebody falls in your restaurant or whatever the case
Yeah.
is. We know what the lawyers are going to charge. We know what the medical expenses are going to be. We have all of that data. When it comes to a cyber, sticking with that,
Yes, you have no idea.
you have no idea because
Right.
you don't know how many records are involved.
And it could turn up 5 years from now.
It
Like,
could come. It could. Yeah, well,
the
they,
length of
they
time.
tend to come fairly quickly. They can take that long though to mature or ripen, as we say. But in addition to dealing with the actual claim, now you're also dealing with the PR concerns.
Sure.
Somebody falls in your restaurant. You know,
Yeah.
it's an unfortunate thing. But when your records are exposed, as an example,
Right.
now you've got all of this negative publicity. You've got social media, you know,
Sure.
typing with their elbows on their computers because they're angry, and
Definitely.
you know, now there's this horde of you know, people bearing pitchforks and torches in front of your business. Now the news trucks start
right,
showing
and
up.
social media really is
Exactly.
very different
Exactly.
than regular.
So that's
complaints.
that's a big
Sure.
issue, and that's one of the reasons that we're seeing larger limits of coverage in that particular
Right.
policy.
What about deductibles in 1 minute or less?
Okay, easy enough to do. The deductible is really just a measure of how much skin in the game you have, what you're going to pay towards part of that claim.
And where do you say, oh my goodness, it's worth me paying this amount?
Again, what you can afford. You know,
Right.
by buying into a higher deductible, you'll save some money, and it may cause you actually pay more attention to your insurance program.
All right, so basically listen to your insurance broker and, you know, purchase what you can afford. Thank you. I
Thank you
really
very much,
appreciate it.
Robin. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Our next guest, I'm excited to introduce Mike Bloomfield. He is the head geek,
President Geek.
president geek, sorry, of Techie Geek. And there's so much scary information out there nowadays with viruses and scams and phishing and vishing. And I'm not trying to make up words, but we kind of get the thought process going. Businesses are challenged even more by that, I would imagine. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing and you know, the scary stuff out there right now.
All right, well, thank you, Robin, for having me. And no, today, cybersecurity, anyone who's watched Game of Thrones, and I do this in a lot of seminars, they say winter is coming for years. And now in Game of Thrones, winter's here. Well, in the cybersecurity realm of businesses, winter is here. IT professionals have been warning for years, you need to watch out. Things are getting really bad out there. Things are very bad out there now. So one of the major things that's happening is everyone's heard of ransomware. At this point, ransomware's been around for over a decade.
Yes, a long time.
But no one really knew about it until about a year ago when the pegavirus came out that affected hundreds of thousands of computers in a single day within 24 hours. That's when businesses started realizing. What's so devastating with ransomware is it takes a whole business computer system, encrypts that, and then demands a ransom back for your own data. 1 in 5 businesses that are affected by a ransomware attack that do not properly back up and protect themselves will close down.
Wow.
So it's worse than a fire occurring to your building. 1 in 5 will close down and be able to recover from that. This year alone, ransomware is going to be a $1 billion business for hackers. $1 billion. Hackers are making money off this. Now the question comes, well, the FBI, why can't they help? It's all using Bitcoins,
they can't find them.
Untraceable. This is all occurring from hackers that are outside the country, usually not within the country. Basically, FBI, if you what they tell you, they put out a guide on ransomware for businesses, is that the most important thing to protect yourself from ransomware is to have a business continuity plan in place to prepare.
So funny how we just talked about that with insurance.
Right. And then, like very similar to how you talk with Michael, for any business, cyber insurance is a must for businesses today because they come after you. If your data gets encrypted, if you're a medical practice, and your medical records are destroyed due to a cyber breach, you're going to go after your doctor.
Right.
And it's very important to have that insurance to protect you. But
what do they ask for? How much do they ask for?
So ransomware is designed to really push. So with data recovery, there's what's known as recovery time objective, RTO. So most businesses want to keep their RTO very quick. They want a cyber attack occurs, they want to be able to get right back up. Well, if you don't have that proper business continuity solution in place, that could take a week, 10 days. Look at Atlanta, the city of Atlanta that was hit a month ago. Their systems were down for over a week, a whole city infrastructure.
Wow.
So what ransomware, what the hackers do is they give you, within 7 days, they give you an initial amount. They don't want you to try to recover. They want you to try to pay. So they might say $5,000 within 7 days. If you don't pay within 7 days, that doubles. And now they give you another 7 days for $10,000, and it keeps doubling every 7 days. And the other problem is people think, well, I'm going to try to see if I can recover this data and wait till day 6 and I'll pay. Well, getting Bitcoins isn't that quick. It's not like going to the bank and pulling out money.
Right.
You need to have a wallet. You have to then have funds that go into a Bitcoin.
Oh, boy.
So just getting $5,000 in Bitcoins could be a 7 to 10 day process. So what huge corporations started doing a couple of months back, almost a year back after the pegavirus, is they started putting money in Bitcoins and holding it. And that's what drove the value of Bitcoins up, was because they needed the money just in case. The corporate entities of the world realized, well, this is real. If God forbid something happened to us, we need to be able to quickly pay. And there's also the belief, the FBI has come out and said they believe the hackers are the ones who are driving the value of the Bitcoin up. Who hacked most of the Bitcoins in the world?
That makes sense.
Most of the Bitcoins were these hackers, and they've been holding on to these Bitcoins. When Bitcoins went from $10, $15 a Bitcoin to $1,900 a Bitcoin, who got rich?
Well, now they're going to have to do something because it's been a little bit low, so that's kind of scary to even think about.
But even a little bit low, 1,900 down to 1,200 from where they initially were, still a lot of money.
What else should businesses be afraid of?
So social engineering, phishing. These are, everyone hears it and they don't realize what it is. So there's more fake mail that gets sent over email than real mail in a day. So what does the fake email look like? It looks like
the regular one.
It looks like Office 365. Microsoft sent you an email and they're asking you to, hey, reset your password. And you click a link and it looks legitimate.
I get Apple a lot.
Apple does it. Around Christmas time on Staten Island, people were getting calls from the Apple store in Staten Island saying that their Apple accounts were hacked and they needed to verify their credit card information and password. All that took was a hacker who used some intelligence and spoofed a phone number and started making calls. With emails, it's not that easy because it comes through, it looks legitimate, you click on the link. So it's very important to, always make note of who's sending you the email. It might say from Microsoft, but what's important is what's in the brackets. Who's the actual email coming from? Microsoft will never misspell their name. It's not going to be Microsoft with the 0. it's going to be Microsoft.com.
And a lot of times if they just click on the address field, they'll see that it's not coming from Microsoft.
It's coming from Microsoft spelled incorrectly.
Right.
It's coming from a .r, Russia, .ru, a
Yes.
.pl in Poland. Most of the time, it's very important to pay attention to where it's
Right.
coming from.
And a major company is not going to call you up over the telephone and tell you you need to update your credit card information. Please give it to me right now and I'll do it for you.
Right, exactly. And the IRS is also not going to call
I
you
know.
up
That's like
and
the
ask
biggest
you to
scam.
pay, a $1,000 fine and back taxes
Yes.
in Walmart and Target gift cards, and ask you, we'll stay on the phone with you while you go there, and then just scratch off the back of the card.
They're also not going to ask you to pay it in cash.
Correct.
So that's the biggest scam in the banking world. We see customers being scammed all the time. They're coming in to make large withdrawals in cash. Little old ladies, and we're telling them you can't have this money because they're saying, no, I have to pay the IRS. Or another one is, my grandson's been arrested and I have to pay the bail.
Yeah, and what thankfully the bankers are becoming smart and trying to protect, and that's why they're now trying to find other means.
Target
the Target
gift
gift cards. Run the Target right now, scratch off an Amazon gift card. They're just trying to
Right.
get their money as quickly as possible. It's scary what's out there, and you just have to be aware.
Right. So now I hear that you have this special way of storing passwords, or, there's something with, well, let me back up. We all have to remember 1 million passwords for logging onto our computers, to logging onto any kind of sales portal, something that we have stored. What's your suggestion with that?
All right. So the most common password in the United States is password 123.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Oh, and the most common place to store your password is under your keyboard. Taped up right under. The first thing I do if I walk into an office and I don't know if the employee's left, I turn that keyboard out, and if that's there, I go, this is bad. So passwords need to be properly stored in a password management tool, both for a business and for a personal. A password management tool allows you to store your password 256-bit encryption. What that means is it's nearly impossible for a computer to get into that quickly. Now, the other important thing is it only allows for you to remember one password. In that, every website, every bank, every social media site you access, you should be using a different password. You should not be reusing passwords. What happens is the phishing attack. What they're trying to do is they're trying to gain your email and your password,
Right.
because computer systems then go and try to use that password on banks on all the different websites.
And if you use the same one, they're going to be able to figure
and
it
you
out.
basically just gave them the keys to the castle.
Wow.
So it's important to always use a different password and then use a password management tool. For personal level, there's one known as KeePass, KeePass. It's a free tool.
Okay.
It's a great tool for personal. For business levels, that's when you need to speak to an
Then
IT
you really-
professional.
And that's really the key, is speak to somebody if you have any cause
Right.
of concern. Thanks, Mike. I
Thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
you being here. It was very exciting, and really, I think everybody learned a lot. I know I did.
I hope I didn't scare you too much.
Scared? Nah. Terrified. No. I want to thank everybody for staying tuned to this episode of Beyond the Ferry. Again, I'm Robin Lefkowitz, and I want to thank all my guests for today. Mike Bloomfield from Techie Geeks. We have Anthony Santos, and we have Michael Purpura from RPM Insurance. Thank you so much. If you want to check out anything on SIEDC, siedc.org, and I look forward to seeing everybody for the next show. Have a good day.